Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Sorry for the late start there. Just a few procedural points to go over. Okay, so welcome everybody to the Planning and Development Management Committee today, the 12th of February, the 11th of March. Read the right roads, Ross. Okay. I would like to ask if there are any apologies for today's meeting.
Yes, Convener. Apologies from Councillor Waters and Councillor Band.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Convener. Regarding that, we have now some colleagues that would like to do training, but unfortunately the training hasn't been forthcoming, so therefore this is why we don't even have substitutes for these two members, which is a bit concerning.
Yeah, I understand that. We have had regular training courses, so I'm not sure it's not been forthcoming. Obviously, if people couldn't actually attend on the time when the training was, I will take that on board. But I'm more than happy to take that back and to see if we can organise additional training so that we can get everybody up to full complement.
That'd be much obliged. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I would like to introduce the top table for everybody. If we start on my right, we have Mrs. Conliffe, Mr. Callan, and Mr. Smith from our planning department, and on my left I have Mr. Fogg from legal, our vice convener Councillor Braun, and Mr. Williams from Democratic Services. I just want to let the committee know that we've had a quick change of staff today due to some illness. We're all prepared. Everybody knows what they're talking about. There's no issues, but I just wanted to let everyone know that the usual team has been substituted, but they're completely up to speed. Do we have any declarations of interest on the proceedings in front of us today? Councillor James.
Thanks, Convener. A non-prejudicial interest in item 2 on the agenda for Stanley, because I forwarded an email forward for the Community Council on their behalf. I had nothing to do with it, but...
Fine. Yep, thank you. And any other... No. That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Another committee happy to hear deputations for the items in front of us. We have deputations for 512, 521 and 522. Are we in agreement to hear those deputations? Agreed. Thank you. Okay. The minutes of the previous Planning and Development Management Committee, are we happy with that they are a true reflection of the meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. And that brings us swiftly on to the items of business in front of us. The first application is an application under Section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 97 to develop land without complying with Condition 13, construction deliveries of planning permission on the 151808 FLM, the formation of a park and ride facility, access road, landscaping and associated works at Nether Lerwell in Perth. And I would like to ask Mrs. Conliffe to speak to the report.
Thank you, Convener. This first slide shows the layout of the proposed site with Dundee Road to the west and north and the small settlement of Kinfons to the north and east. The railway and the River Tay are located to the south. The full site extends to approximately 4 hectares, but you can see on the slide here that the functional part and the proposed works are all located to the west of the site. Now, this includes parking for approximately 240 vehicles, a bus interchange, turning infrastructure, cycling facilities, excuse me, and a suds drainage. There's also significant landscaping proposed around whilst retaining the existing landscaping which is on the boundaries of the site. The proposal is exactly the same as the proposal which was previously granted planning permission back in 2015, and the applicant merely through the Section 42 wishes to amend one of the conditions in terms of the construction delivery, which would allow construction delivery to take place on a Saturday morning between 8 AM and 1 PM, and that would tie in with the hours of operation which are currently have planning permission. This second slide shows an aerial view that's been taken from Kinnell Hill. The red line shows the full site that we saw in that previous slide, and the green area is an indicative of the works that are proposed as the functional part of the site. And the remainder of the site would be exactly the same in it's currently still in the agricultural and grazing land. The building that you see there, which is just out with the site, was previously part of the Edrington Group for offices, and that's now been sold and is partly occupied again as office accommodation. We're now down on the site. We're looking in a sort of north-eastwards direction towards that office building that I referred to previously, and you saw from the previous slide. It shows here very open area of the site, relatively flat, not much difference in the topography, and you can see some of the trees there around the boundary, and they will all be retained, but significant planting is also proposed. And back to the layout plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask members, do they have any questions for officers? Councillor Wilson.
Kind of one-line question, Convener. I think the only thing we're being asked to consider today is the change of condition. Is that correct?
That is correct.
On the Saturday morning as outlined.
That is correct, yes. Any further questions on this application? Councillor Gray.
Who else would be using that access on a Saturday who would not otherwise be using it throughout the week? For instance, some recreational facility which is open on a Saturday but not during the week, and therefore it's used by a different group of people.
I'm not aware that there's any difference at the weekend. Obviously, as you come in from the access off the main route, it takes you down towards the leisure facilities that you've got down at Walnut Grove down there. But they are in operation all week. There may be a little bit more down to the sailing on a Sunday, but certainly in terms of my colleagues in transport planning, there's been no concern over the additional. The permission as it stands at the moment allows for the construction work on the Saturday anyway, and this would just be to allow for delivery, which had been restricted to the Monday to Friday.
One further question. Can we approve the
Certainly.
paper?
Yes, I'm happy. We have an approval of the paper. Is everybody in agreement with that, or are there amendments? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. That was takes us on to the next application in front of us. Okay, this is the erection of 183 dwelling houses and 4 flats, formation of a vehicle access, play park, landscaping and associated works, approval of matters specified in conditions 17-00088 IPM, land at Stanley, and that's in the LDP site H30. And I would like to ask Mr. Callan to speak to the report.
Thank you, Convener.
Convener, could I just come in for a second, please, just to give one update before Mr. Callan does the slides? Thank you. Can I just draw the attention to members? There is an error in the report with regard to the road number. There are 3 occasions in paragraphs 3, 4 and 63 which refer to the A93, and it should be the B9099. So I'll just confirm that again in paragraphs 3, 4 and 63. The other times in the report is correct, but those 3 are wrong. So apologies for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Callan?
This first slide shows the site location plan. It's a 14.6 hectare site at the southwestern edge of Stanley Village. To the north, you will see Duchess Street, and to the east is the B9099 Perth Road. To the south is agricultural land, and immediately adjacent, running along the western perimeter of the site, is the Perth Inverness rail line. This is an aerial shot of the site showing its relationship with Stanley, and what you will see within this is existing structural woodland that's already well established. This is the proposed site layout plan showing vehicular access of the B9099 Perth Road and a pedestrian cyclist access at the end of Duchess Street next to the bridge over the rail line. It's 184 houses, 183 houses and 4 flats in total, with the structural woodland being retained, open space provision, Suds Pond in the southwest corner, along with underground gas supply. This is a view from the southern end of the site. It'd be 9099 along the Perth Road, so you're facing north in towards Stanley, and you can see in the background some of the structural woodland. This again is a shot slightly closer in along the B999. Again, you can see the structural woodland in the background. Another shot from the B999, but this is directly across from the proposed access into the site, and this is a view south towards Lunkerting. This photograph is taken from Duchess Street, and you can just see in the top left corner the existing field access into the site, and also the bridge which crosses over the rail line. This is a view directly in from Duchess Street along the existing field access, and immediately right beyond the wooden fence is the embankment leading down onto the rail line. This is a shot from just inside the field access, heading back out towards Duchess Street, and you can see the bridge over the rail line and the embankment. And almost doing a pirouette, this is back over from the north of the site, looking over, and you can see the structural woodland in the background, and also some of the structural woodland on the right hand side, which goes down along the perimeter with the rail line. This is the proposed landscape planting plan, which shows the 2 woodland belts been retained, an area in the middle been cleared to form a path right up to the middle of the site to link up with Duchess Street, and woodland and planting along the southern boundary as well to help contain the site and improve the kind of the visual appearance. And back to the layout.
Thank you very much. We have deputations on this. So I would like to ask, excuse me, let's get to Mr. Is it Riche to come forward? He is representing Stanley Community Council. Apologies, sir, if I mispronounced your name. Okay, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. You'll be notified when there's a minute left, and then if you're okay, the committee will ask you some questions based on your deputation. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Planning Committee for allowing me to, as the Community Council Chair, to make this representation today. There is no objection in the community or by the Community Council in principle to the development at all. We have serious issues with the planned layout of the access and egress points in the plans. It's marked as a T-junction. Now, I've been in Stanley all my life, and I believe that local knowledge here should be given some consideration. To outline the site and be seen by the slides, and I feel that they do not really do justice to the topographical layout of the site, which is a pity. So, to outline the site, there is a blind corner at the village side of that road, at the Perth side of the road, and there's a hill summit at the village side of the road. The speed of the vehicles on that road, it's historically known as an area where speeding is quite bad, and it has been reported to Police Scotland on various occasions over the years. We carried out a vehicle survey on an entirely different matter during October, November, at peak times in the morning and in the afternoon. And in a period in the morning of 2.5 hours, there was 1,000 vehicles travelled that route. In the afternoon, and it was about 3:30, I can give you fixed times if you wish. There was 950 vehicles monitored on the Perth Road. Now, if we look at the T junction as it's marked, and if we take into account the bus stops, the bus stop nearest the village has the luxury of there's no development there. They can make a lay-by, a lay-in, so the bus can come off the road. But the bus travelling into Perth has to stop on the B9099 near the blind corner, which means that all the vehicles have to overtake the bus at that point. And that is it's horrendously dangerous to do that. If we also take into account a survey of a national survey that there's roughly about 1.3 vehicles per household, there's 183 houses there. That could mean an increase in excess of 100 vehicles joining the B9099 at that T junction. Given the knowledge that we have on that road, that's really unacceptable to have a T junction at that point. And really, it's an accident waiting to happen. During the winter months, there are occupied housing on the roadside, as you come into Perth, would be on the left-hand side. They will have to contend with noise, vehicle carbon emissions, and there's about 4 to 5 houses here, and the vehicle lights will shine directly into the house as they exit through the T junction. If at a peak time the emergency services were called to the site, there is only one entrance and exit. If the road is busy, they could be held up. And it's historical that you can be held up on the Perth Road in Stanley for up to 5 minutes. That's unacceptable for the emergency services to be held up for that length of time. So we would therefore ask the Planning Committee to refuse this application on these grounds.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions from committee? Councillor Gray, then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and I can appreciate your local concerns. Could you indicate where the bus stop going towards Perth is on the plan behind you? I can see the dot, which perhaps is where the bus stop going into Stanley is. That is about midway between the entrance and the bend.
Right, the bus stop, the bus that would have to wait on the B9099 would be roughly about the centre. It's a difficult plan to see this on. Let me just get my bearings here. I'm assuming that's a T junction at this bottom end here, so it would be just to the centre of the bottom part of that plan. And it would be near the corner. I think there's an easier plan to look at that shows the layout of the road. But it would still be, that bus being able to stop there would still be close to the blind corner coming from Perth. And that is an accident black spot, actually. There's quite a few vehicles, because of speed, have gone into the field there.
For clarification, I don't know if you can see the little hand that's moving up and down along the side. Can you point to where the bus stop is, please?
Sorry, see the black spot down at the bottom here?
Yeah.
That would be the
That's
one
the
there.
bus stop there.
Yeah. Sorry, I was misled with the plan.
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, the plan doesn't do this, doesn't do the actual layout any justice, to be quite truthful with you.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for your
Morning.
presentation. 1 or 2 questions. The speed limit at the moment on the road is 30?
It's 30, yes.
Right. Are there any aspirations of the Community Council, partly because of the proposed house building and partly because of the topography, to reduce that?
Yes, we've made a request for that. They have already reduced the speed outside the local school to 20 miles per hour, and we've asked for it to be considered an extension of that 20 miles per hour out of the village.
Okay. You made the case for thinking, because of the volume of existing traffic and the number of houses, that a T-junction wouldn't do, basically. Do you have a solution? That's identifying what you think the problem is, but is there a solution?
Well, we have discussed this at the Community Council meetings, And a solution has been put forward. Why not consider a roundabout there? Not a ghost roundabout, because it just means people can drive right over the top of it, but consider a larger roundabout in that area. That would also take the traffic approaching the B909 at the T junction. It would take them back from that road, so that the effect of the lights and the noise would obviously be reduced for the tenants that have the houses at the side of the road there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Reid.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm not a fan of roundabouts at all. Have you thought about smart traffic lights as a solution?
Yes, that was mentioned at our meeting as well. And I mean, these things we feel should be given consideration rather than just this T junction and nothing else. What I didn't mention was the number of pedestrians that this site will create as well, who will have to cross that road because the pavement's only on one side. And there'll be school kids and everything that will need to cross to catch the school bus.
So if something was put in to mitigate your concerns about that T junction, you'd be quite happy to support the application?
I would put it to the community, and I'm quite sure that they would consider it favourably. But obviously I can't speak for them, but...
Can I just remind councillors that the actual, there's a separate application for the roads. This is not part of the application in front of us today. So whilst I understand the concerns and I'm perfectly happy for the debate to take place, the actual application for the road infrastructure is a separate application. Just to point that out. Councillor Wilson?
Are we allowed to ask you a question on that then? Or will we wait till later?
Any further questions? Councillor Braun.
Just a very minor question, so thank you for your presentation. The bus stop on the southbound side, which we've located, is that where it is now, or has that been moved, or is it proposed to be moved?
There's not a bus stop there.
There's no bus stop there at all? Right, okay, fine. And where is the southbound bus stop? In the Stanley itself?
It's from the village.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Lane, thank you very much for your attendance today. No problem. As with every deputation, you have 5 minutes to address the committee, and you'll be notified when there's a minute left to go. And if you are happy to answer questions, that would
certainly will be. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for allowing me to speak today. I'm a bit concerned with what I've heard just previously, where unfortunately the officers have been unwell and they're unable to attend, the ones who have done the work here. It's also very disappointing. It's such an important matter that we get totally the wrong road in the report 3 times, which does not give me great confidence in the work carried out, I'm afraid. I would also like to point out it's not up to the chair of the Community Council to come up with solutions. It's up to the developer to provide solutions. I'm also very concerned that we're doing a bit of cart and horse here. We're going to pass houses and then look at the dangerous bit of getting the road done. Surely the road should have been the first part to be decided before you decide to put houses in. It's only logical, because if you decide that the road is, that the houses are going to go in there, which will be the longest cul-de-sac, I think, in Britain, with one way in and one way out onto a dangerous road, I think that you should at least have passed the road first, because the pressure will then be put onto the roads team to find a solution, whereas the pressure should be surely on the applicant to find the solution for the road problem before they apply for housing. After that, I would like to say that nobody in Stanley, myself as a councillor, or the Stanley Development Trust, or the Community Council, or residents, we do not object to houses being built on the site. This is in itself departs from the usual pattern of objection heard in this chamber. What everyone with an understanding of Stanley, in particular the B9099, at the intended junction point, will understand is that this is not a suitable point for the volume of traffic, which will enter and exit the site, in effect, an 180-odd housing cul-de-sac. I think that committee members may wish to visit this site to get an idea of actually what the topography is. The pictures are obviously factual, but they were very misleading, and I think anybody from Stanley or anybody who knows that road or drives that road would be hard pushed to recognise the actual situation from the way the pictures were taken. So I think that I would at least expect the councillors who are not familiar with this road to actually visit it before they make such a decision. The road officers in Stanley, just recently we heard about the new crossing that was put up. There was a new crossing put up. There was a road traffic plan, management plan to close the road for 3 days by council officers of Perth Kinross. Unfortunately, because of the volume of traffic, which was obviously underestimated, the road closure was lifted after 4 hours because it was totally unable to be, it was unworkable, and the road was not closed after that at these times. So I'm just pointing that out, and the fact that it may show that the understanding of the capacity of the traffic there is maybe not as great as it should be. We as a council are responsible for not putting in the relief road at Stuart Tower Road, which would take maybe 20% of the traffic off instead of it going through Stanley. We decided not to put the funding into that road, and now we're meaning that the people of Stanley will have to endure that traffic as well as this extra traffic. If you have somebody coming from Stanley to turn into the cul-de-sac, and there is, as we know, heard 1,000 vehicles coming from Perth going in the other direction, they will be stopped. There could be then a queue of traffic coming right back. They'll be backed up round the corner unless somebody decides to let them turn right across the lane, because you've got so much traffic coming towards you, and you're sitting there with another vehicle behind you, another vehicle behind you, another vehicle, and a bus. Unless somebody gives way, you could be backed up 15 cars, and you'd be backed round the corner. In here it says that it's the optimum solution. It's the optimum solution in a bad place.
You have 1 minute left.
If you have 70 yards, obviously the optimum solution will be in the middle. The optimum solution would be to invest more money and put it on a totally different road on the B099 at the far side. It would be much more expensive, but it would be the optimum position to put an access road into that site. It's optimum position for the developer because it's the lower cost option. That does not make it the optimum site for having an ingress and egress into this area. 183 houses with one way in, one way out onto the B9099. If it was the A93, I could understand it, and maybe that was wishful thinking, but the B9099, it's not. That's all I have to say, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions, for Councillor Lane? Councillor Braun.
Good morning to you. Just to clarify, you said other entrances that you did describe it. If you could just locate it on the map where you feel that entrance should be.
The entrance, well, it's probably not be on the map because the map's so small that you've only got the site there. The road that comes down to that is over the other side of the hill or the quarry. It's on a dead straight. There's a council car park in there for where the paddlers or canoeists or whatever you want to call them use. That's on a great big long straight where there's already a development pass further along there for I don't know how many chalets that goes onto that road.
Okay.
And that would be the safest, and I don't think anybody could argue the safest, but it would involve a lot of work and it would involve a lot of expense.
Any further questions? No. Councillor Lane, thank you very much indeed. Got off easy.
Well, disappointingly easy. I would have rather had some more questions.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We have a further deputation. Could I please ask now, I believe we have two. We have Mr. Kernahan and Mr. Wood to come forward. Thank you very much for your attendance today. As with the previous deputations, you have a collective 5 minutes to address the committee. You'll be notified when there's a minute left to go, and hopefully you'll be available to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Andrew Wood from Bidwells. Thank you, convener, ladies and gentlemen. I've been working on this project with Stanley Community Council and Development Trust for 20 years. I was involved in planting the trees that you have seen on the pictures. There's some key issues here. We're bringing forward development, and thank you for the support of the community in terms of the other aspects of this that will bring forward affordable housing and a core path link and contributions to the various other items in the village, particularly the new sports hub. The key issue here from the other deputations seems to be the position of the access. Going back in time, I think about 15 years ago, we proposed a different solution to the access to this site. It was turned down and refused by the local authority for many reasons, particularly landscape. Its undulating topography there. To bring in a road somewhere else would have a huge impact on the landscape as you come into Stanley. The road access that is proposed, and I would draw your attention to the Duchess Street access, which will also facilitate an emergency access, which I think was one of the key concerns. There have been numerous meetings with Perth Kinross Council roads teams and our traffic experts, who I'm sorry could not be here today. We've looked at many solutions to try and facilitate an access. Now, we're in a 30-mile-an-hour limit here. We have got bends in the road, which already act as traffic calming measures. So the traffic speeds, as you approach that part of Stanley, you're between two tight bends, so traffic speeds are already lower. There is going to be additional traffic calming measures adjacent to the junction, which have been submitted to Perth and Kinross Council Roads Department in line with their recommendations. There's a pedestrian crossing going in just north of the junction. There's a further pedestrian crossing on Duchess Street to create two safe routes for pedestrians and cycling traffic into the village. There's a ghost lane in terms of the access at the T-junction as well. So there's scope for vehicles to move in and get in and out of the T-junction. The bus stop positions, again, we had several meetings with Perth and Kinross Council experts on the location of the bus stops and the style and implementation of those. So those are regarded, and I'm not an expert on bus stop locations, but those are regarded by the experts as the optimal places to put those, linked in with new footpaths and a link to the core path network. Just check and see if there's anything else that's of concern. Just on road safety, there has been actually a further independent road safety audit carried out to stage 2, which is something you wouldn't normally require to do at this stage of an application. It would be further on in the process with the RCC. Now, to highlight and cover off any concerns, because clearly we don't want a situation that is unsatisfactory, we've actually carried out that independent and instructed that independent road safety audit. We've got the findings of that, and they've shown no issues with the revised proposals that are before the council. I don't think I've got anything else to add. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Okay, I open it up to questions. Oh, we have hands going up. I'll work my way down. If we can start off with Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Purvis.
Thank you for that presentation. Very interesting. One point is, why have you put this application before the application for the road access?
My understanding was that they were submitted at the same time. So I think it's the choice of the council to take the order of the applications. We submitted them at the same time.
Thank you.
Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Convener. And if you will allow, I appreciate that we're only looking at the application for the houses today, but obviously we've spoken about the vehicular access separately. I wondered if you could just outline where, given the deputations, where that access was 15 years ago that was refused.
Well, I don't have a plan in front of me that shows, but it started much further to the south and came off through the middle of a hill, and then cut back into the village. Because it's adjacent to the Tay landscape area, There were significant concerns about that proposal in terms of the wider landscape, and that was dismissed in a previous local plan.
Point of order, Convener, if I may.
Certainly.
In my 2.5 years plus on this committee, I've never come across an application where we don't have the information in regards to road safety and transport that enables us to properly consider this application. I find it very unusual that we're getting part of the story but not the full story. The situation is exacerbated by the unfortunate absence of key officers who have been directly involved in this project. And I'm wondering if, in the circumstances, we should discontinue this debate for today and come back once the other application is before us as well.
Whilst I understand the point that you're raising, there's a couple of things I will mention. One, I'm sure there are questions that you'll be able to ask of officers that will be able to answer the questions that will come forward. Secondly, we have an application in front of us today, and we have people here with the information to be able to respond to those. It is my understanding that both applications came through at the same time. They came forward at the same time, but due to additional information required by our roads team when they were assessing the other application, that has meant that this side of the application has come, this part of the application has come forward far quicker than the other side. So that is the way the process will go. I would like to continue with the debate because I believe we have an application in front of us that we have the information to be able to assess.
Sorry, Convener. Following up from my colleague, Councillor Drysdale, I think it's a little unfair on the developers. If we are, as Councillor Drysdale has said, we're only seeing half the story, and such an important thing as access to the site surely has to be decided at the same time, because if the access to the site changes, so does that.
Councillor James, are you asking a question of the people who are here to do a deputation?
No, I was only asking.
Well, I'll happily answer any questions or have officers answer questions. Please ask your question.
Thank you very much for your deputation today.
Could I just add something?
Sorry.
The road safety audit and all the junction information is submitted with the main application as well as the separate application. So the junction and all the detail that is in the other application is with this housing application also, and has been considered by Perth Kinross Council Roads and Transport Department.
So all of the relevant information to do with the junction should be before you, because it formed part of this application as well.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor James.
Thank you for that. And yes, I have looked at the junction. I have looked at that plan, and what I'm saying is we're being asked to make a decision on your layout, which actually is, from my own point of view, is quite acceptable, and I know you have a good reputation within the community of Stanley. Would you agree with me, though, that access to this site is key, and also why have you chosen, although it says in our report that it's an optimum place, is it the best place for a junction?
I think we haven't gone into the access issue lightly. I mean, there's been a huge effort spent on that in terms of the council's own officers and in terms of the consultants that have been working on this. And they have looked at numerous designs and numerous layouts, and they've worked together to come up with a solution. Now, it has to be a junction that is away from the bend. Everybody recognises having a junction right on the bend would not be ideal. It has to have sufficient sight lines, and what is not shown on the plans in terms of the cross sections is that the land on the left, on the west side of the road as you approach Stanley, that land will be reduced in level to facilitate the junction, so it will not be going into the site on a steep angle, and there will be sufficient sight lines to get that junction in there and give sufficient space. I mean, it meets all the latest dimensions in terms of your road standards, and the road will be, is being widened there to facilitate the junction and the ghost lane that would approach the site. So, yeah, I mean, I think it is the optimal place. It's probably, I suspect, the only place that you can access the site in reality. And it's within a 30-mile-an-hour limit. If it turned to a 20-mile-an-hour limit, I think that would be fine as well. And in terms of the detailed structure of the junction, it is part of a traffic calming measure as well. So you've got a complete change to the road structure as you come to the junction, and then beyond that, you have a signalised pedestrian crossing. So it's got all of these safety features built into the junction to facilitate a safe access in and out of the site.
I fully understand that. I use that road morning and night, and I don't think that anything along that stretch of road is a safety feature. It's a hugely well-used road and dangerous with the sharp bends.
Apologies, Councillor James, we're still
Sorry.
on questions.
Yeah.
I am perfectly happy for you to make
questions.
comments at the right time, but please, if you
With
have a
regards
question,
to
please
this
do so.
site then, is your intention to sort this junction out before you start any development in there? Or will you be doing the development and the junction in conjunction with each other? Or
In terms of the detail of the construction, the roads have to come first. Definitely.
Sorry, one last one. I'm aware, with Muir Homes, development at Strathford, which is just coming to an end at the end of it, Lynn Road. There's been some issues with drainage and the site in general. This is on a main road, heavily used. Will this site be in a better state than the one that's currently in Lynn Road?
I think everybody in construction has had what you'd call a difficult time in the last 12 months. In terms of the amount of rainfall we've had. If you go to any site around central Scotland today, you'll find there's quite a lot of mud around. Yeah, I mean, the Lynn Road site down at the bottom end, finishing the last few houses has been difficult because of the weather. I think everybody accepts that. This site all drains back towards the railway, so I would be quite confident that we're not going to have issues about mud coming onto the road and things like that, because the construction access will be all dealt with at the start.
Thank you. We have Councillor Reid, then Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Barnacle.
I'm not sure if I can actually ask my question, because it was going to be on the traffic calming measures which has been mentioned. Is that allowable?
They have been mentioned in deputation, so you can ask questions on
Yeah. Can you just tell me exactly what the traffic calming measures that you're putting in are?
My understanding is that as you come to the junction will be on a raised area within the road, but in a different colour, with anti-skid surfacing.
Right, so there's going to be a ramp. So there's going to be a ramp.
It's going to be raised. Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah.
And there's going to be a signalised pedestrian crossing somewhere
to the north of that. Yeah.
Going to and from where?
See the path that comes down and comes to where the recess bus stop is?
No, a pointer.
There's a wee hand somewhere that can maybe...
Hand up, that path there.
Up a bit?
Just
up a bit?
Yeah, just slightly up. There's a crossing there and a little island.
Right, okay, I've got
offset from the
It should be. You should have it. It should be on your plan, actually.
Yeah, it's been shown to me.
There's the larger.
And have you thought about traffic lights at the exit entrance?
They've been discussed with the council officials.
And would you be happy to put them in?
We would, but I don't think they're the right solution in terms of maintaining traffic flow there.
What about safety?
Well, we've had an independent, that's nothing to do with us, we've had an independent safety audit, and you can only go with what the experts tell you. So we've asked them to audit the solution that we've put before them, and they have said that that is absolutely safe in terms of the design of the road.
Okay, well, we'll see that. One final question. The open market numbers, you say it's in the papers it's 140, but by my arithmetic, which might be wrong, it adds up to 134. What's the correct answer, correct figure? On paragraph 4, open market.
There's 187 units in
It's
total.
187.
No, never mind. I'm just talking about open market.
140 and then 47 affordable.
140.
140 and 47.
Right, it's just
affordable.
if you add up these figures that you've got, it comes up to 134 in the open market.
Oh, I haven't done the calculation on the figures there, but it is 140 and 47.
So can you tell me what
Councillor
the
Reid,
extra...
remember, Councillor Reid, I'm sorry to
houses
interrupt,
are?
but we have a deputation here from the applicant. This is the report of handling. I think that would be a question maybe you should put to officers. Do you have any further questions for the deputation?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Barnacle, and then Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks for your presentation, gentlemen. Just to quiz you a little bit more about the proposed pedestrian crossing, how many metres away from the proposed junction is that?
I don't know. I don't have that detail in front of me, I'm afraid. But it's in line with the design recommendations from Perth Kinross Council in terms of the distance north of the junction to provide a safe crossing point with the area in between. Now it's a pedestrian crossing that is pedestrian operated, so that it stops the traffic. It's not a pelican crossing.
Well, first of all, I'm going to press you on the distance because that's a fact I think that would be useful. Is it within sight of the junction?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not going to hold you to the exact meterage, but is it 100 metres away?
No, it's much less than that.
Less than, okay. Right. And it's a signalised pedestrian crossing, so if you're using it, you press a button and the light will go to red at some
Correct.
stage.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The studies that you've had conducted on your behalf, I'm assuming that all of that detail has been presented to the planning service?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
We have a list of councillors, so I'll add you to the list, Councillor Anderson. We have Councillor Barnacle, Councillor Braun, then Councillor Anderson.
Is this where the pedestrian, can someone point out maybe to Councillor Wilson where the pedestrian crossing is in relation to using this drawing, or is that not appropriate?
There's, there. Got it on a slightly larger copy.
No, because, well, I would like to know where it is on this drawing, if someone could point it out to me. That's where I thought, yeah, I was right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Barnacle, then Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. I want to really echo Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Grant Lang's deputation on this question of the road issue being dealt with separately to the housing application. Because the proposal talks about formation of a vehicular access, then in paragraph 71, the separate application for delivery of the access. So my question is, why did you submit two applications rather than an all-encompassing one application dealing with all of this together? Was that because you were encouraged to do it by the planning department, or you chose to do it yourself?
That's a good question. We chose to do it ourselves, and the reason is that we recognised that the junction was a sensitive issue. We were hoping that the junction would come before the committee some time ago. This application was on track to be considered in September last year. And for various reasons in terms of getting it here, it got delayed. At that stage, we still had consultation in terms of the internal layout that was going on, in terms of just detailed things. So what we were proposing was we put forward an application for the junction to have that. And then alongside the detail would come forward for other things. I mean, this is a reserved matters application. It's already got a planning in principle. So that's why it was put in 2 stages. It was to try and keep things moving.
Just a supplementary. So your expectation was, in doing this, that they would either be dealt with together or, in fact, the junction issue might be dealt with first?
Correct, hopefully. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Convener. Just a couple of questions, if I may. I think I'm right in hearing when you did your deputation, you were talking about the access onto Duchess Road would be a possible emergency vehicle access.
Yes.
Is that is it going to be just purely for emergency vehicles, or could it be made a secondary access for?
No, it couldn't be made a secondary access. It's too narrow. The sight lines within the housing next to it and the bridge parapets over the railway line would preclude it being a full access.
Right. So presumably there would be a barrier there, which only emergency.
Yeah, it would be a knockdown barrier type approach, right, because there's going to be a path coming out through there for the link to school and a pedestrian crossing at the top end of it. Yeah.
Thank you. And my second question, if I may. We were talking about, Councillor Reid has actually preempted this a little bit, but traffic calming on the road. You mentioned, I think, that the bends does slow the traffic down. I've used the road myself regularly, and I don't think it does slow traffic down that much there. It's quite a fast road. Is it just literally going to be this table? I think I call it a traffic table going, and there's no other calming methods proposed?
Well, there'll be a change in the colour of the surface of the road.
Right.
But there's no other traffic calming measures that would sort of narrow the road or that sort of thing, because we've gone with the advice that we've had from the local authority on this. If the council chose to make it 20 miles an hour through Stanley, we would be entirely supportive of that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jack. Fine. Okay, committee, do we have any further questions? No. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for answering all the questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Committee, I open it up to questions to... waiting for a whole raft of hands to go up. Now it's time for questions to officers. Councillor Gray is first and out the bit. So if you'd like to start.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have 4 brief questions here. What is the actual sightline distance north from the access? Does anyone know?
I think I'd leave that to our transport planning advisor.
Lapman, do you have the...
Yep. Thank you for your question. The forward visibility in both directions is 43 metres, which is compliant with what we're needing for 30 miles an hour.
That was my next question. Yes. That being on such a road as the B909, 9099. Shall the bus stops be so designed to avoid tailbacks behind stationary buses?
The bus stop to the north, it will be within a lay-by. The one to the south will be within the traffic, within the main running lane. And there should be space for vehicles to pass, should they require to.
To pass without going on to the other carriageway?
No, they'll have to go into the oncoming carriageway.
As they do at the moment, if they stop on that?
Yes.
Correct. Yeah, okay. Now, should this application be approved today with the access road in this location, would it still be possible to amend the design of the actual junction should it be deemed necessary for approval of junction of the B with the B9099 design? If you understand me, could we still approve this but still amend the actual junction from being a T-junction to perhaps a roundabout or whatever other means is suggested before the forthcoming application of the junction design?
All the information is there, and I think what we've tried to make clear in the report, and obviously Lachlan's there to answer questions, we are perfectly satisfied with the arrangements in place. The application for the junction is exactly the same as the details shown here. We are satisfied with that. In terms of the other application, the reason it's not before committee is that there are not sufficient comments on the application to put it before committee. We could have approved it already under delegated powers. We've waited until seeing if there are any issues and perhaps changes to the layout that may have an impact on the data that's being used to come to the conclusions that we have. But if this application was to be approved, we would be approving the junction under delegated powers.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Braun, then Councillor James.
Thank you very much, Convener. It's a question for transport again. We've heard several comments made regarding the road. It is a very fast road. There's no doubt about it. We've had comments of other solutions, a roundabout, smart traffic lights, possibly even part-time traffic lights. Have we considered those and any reason why they weren't put forward?
Other options have been looked at in collaboration with the applicant. It was felt that the T-junction with the right turn facility was an appropriate measure there, and also putting in the pedestrian crossing facility, which would allow the safe passage of pedestrians across to the footway on the opposite side. That will give them access to the bus stop and allow them to walk into the village as well.
If I could just ask a supplementary, because I've travelled the road in the morning and in the evening. I mean, southbound to Perth in the mornings is extremely busy, and it could be very difficult to pull out, I would have thought, to turn right onto the Perth direction. And likewise, at night time, there's a heavy volume of traffic coming from Perth. To turn left coming out or turning in would be difficult. It would seem more logical some other means, I would have thought, but I accept your expertise, but yeah, the volume of traffic going through there in peak times is quite high and quite fast.
Mr. Smith will answer the question.
The junction has been designed to deal with those issues, and we are satisfied that the design is perfectly adequate. Yes, from time to time someone will need to wait until it is safe to do so, and they will drive to the conditions, but the design is perfectly in line with our standards and accounting for all the studies that have been undertaken.
Councillor James, then Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. That's a little bit disconcerting, actually, to hear that the layout, which is the cause of much of the problem, can be just passed through under delegated powers. And I have a concern with that.
Sorry, Councillor James, that's down to the amount of comments that have come forward from the community. If there had been enough comments from the community based on that, it would have come to committee.
But, Convener, there was an issue with getting onto the planning portal for quite a while, and I know the community couldn't access it. Hence my reason for declaring an interest earlier, because I had to pass something on for the community.
Mr.
So
Smith will answer that point.
All the information was on the planning portal. I think, as I've indicated to yourself and to Mr. Reish, it would appear that there are software issues with the user. So whoever is trying to access the portal, depending on what software they have on their own device, they may not be able to see it immediately. If they had contacted us, we would have told them exactly what a workaround for that could be for the very, very few number of people that experience that. It's not a problem with the website. It's not a problem with the portal. It's an issue associated to the individual user's device. But we can advise them on how to deal with that, and we did do that. My understanding as well is that the issues associated with accessing the information at the point of time that was put to us was not during the period of time where comments could have been made in any case.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Smith. My understanding was that there was an update on those road layouts which nobody had seen. And yes, there was an issue, okay. We'll deal with that, but I just have a concern that it will go through on delegated powers, and this is a critical issue regarding this here. If we're looking at it, you know, we've dealt with the road layout to death, and I'll be honest with you, I think it's dangerous. I use that on a daily basis, And where it is, I know you're saying you're going to have...
My apologies, Councillor James,
Sorry.
to mention this again. We are open for questions.
Questions, okay.
Whilst I understand you want to back that up with comments, but we have a time for comments. So if you could give a question,
okay, question.
and then I will happily give you an airtime for comments if we get on to
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would officers going to the junction then and questions, would the officers be happy with a realigned junction to perhaps in the same position but with either lights or a roundabout?
That's not what's before us, and what's before us we consider as adequate and meets with the standards.
Okay, thank you. So the answer to that's no. Okay, with view to the report then, page 47 of the report, item 98, paragraph 98, checklist concludes the buildings will achieve a much lower standard than that required. Is that lower or better? If we talk, I've gone off the junction now because I think we're flogging a dead horse there. But sustainability, paragraph 98 on page 47, it says halfway down the paragraph, it says the checklist concludes that the buildings will achieve a much lower standard than that required under Scottish building standards.
That does mean it'll achieve a better standard. What we're looking to achieve long term is a gold standard in terms of building regulations. We're currently in kind of bronze, silver category at the moment, and moving towards gold.
Okay, fine. So it's better rather than a lower standard.
It is
because the way I read that is we're allowing something to go through when it's not sufficient.
Yeah, I think what it means is that there would be less impact on carbon.
Fine.
Okay.
Happy with that. Plain English, love it. And again, would it, can I ask officers, would it be competent to defer this item until we get a decision on the junction?
I think that's up to the committee, but as I indicated earlier, we are in a position to make a decision on the junction. Perhaps, in retrospect, we maybe should have approved that junction already, but we felt that if there was to be any amendment, and taking in some of the comments which said, if, for example, the application was refused because it was felt that it was too many houses, and that was to be reduced, or vice versa, to be increased, we might have to review the data associated to the junction to determine whether or not that was an appropriate solution and any changes required. But the fact is that, on the basis of the information and layout we are happy with the junction and could have approved it already.
We have a few councillors, just so that you are aware that I have seen you. We have Councillor Wilson, followed by Councillor Reid, Councillor Purvis, Councillor Anderson, and then Councillor Drysdale. So we'll go through that list. Councillor Wilson, you're next, sir.
Thanks, Convener. I just want to deal with the box at the very top of page 1 of our report, because there's an element of confusion arisen, I think, at the meeting about what we're actually approving today. But, Convener, can you confirm to me that if we were to approve this application, that would include the formation of a vehicular access?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
I think that's simply saying that there will be an access to the site.
Yeah, but
so it's just saying there will be an access to the site. That access runs the full length of the development. So accessing house 1 through to house 140.
Right, but with respect, Mr. Smith, we have a plan before us, which we're asked to approve, right? And we have a plan that shows a junction, right, as well as a street layout. So therefore, if we were to approve the report in its entirety today, that would include the street layout and the junction.
The situation, the matters specified here are not to include the junction. The junction is being dealt with separately.
Okay.
So the condition that relates to the junction.
Okay, I understand that. I'm going to, I think, recycle Councillor James's question. It's partly for Mr. Fogg and partly for the planners. Would it be competent in due course when we get to the detailed stage, right, of discussion for us to defer consideration of this application until we have before us, and we could maybe perhaps ask for this report, the detail of the road access that it be brought to this committee rather than dealt with under delegated powers. There is a facility, convener, within the rules, I understand, that the planning service, whilst it may have the opportunity to deal with matters under delegated powers, can decide to put matters to the Planning and Development Management Committee if it so deems so.
My question is a direct follow-up. Can I ask that at the same time and then answer both? Is that okay?
And mine as well, actually.
Okay. I appreciate the points that have been made about the lack of comments on the specific application for the vehicular access, but looking at the comments on the application for the housing, there are a number of objections that are on the basis of the vehicular access. So I do think it's somewhat disingenuous to say that there's been no comments on that. I appreciate in the sense of on the specific application, but the fact that there have been two separate applications has perhaps caused some confusion. People, because as Mr. Smith has outlined, the vehicular access is detailed in the site layout plan of the application that we're considering today. There may have been a feeling, if when people were commenting, that by objecting to this application, they were also objecting to the access, which seems to be the main issue. And also echo the point that Councillor Wilson has said that, well, yes, you can, officers can approve it under delegated powers. Obviously, given the link with this application, perhaps it would be sensible to bring both back to this committee.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Drysdale say that you've got follow-ons. I don't want to get lost in the questions that need to be answered, but I will allow you to ask the comments or the question that you want added to that.
Sorry. Thank you, convener. Yeah, I mean, I was simply wanting to ask a question of Mr. Fogg, which was whether condition 3 of the proposed recommendation, which states that the road infrastructure improvement shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the council as planning authority, if that could be amended, if it would be competent to amend that to be shall be submitted to and approved by the Planning and Development Management Committee.
I don't know if you're managing to get all these, Jeff.
Very similar. That is it competent to defer or even reject this on the matter of the road access? Because I'm not satisfied with what has been put in front of us. But it seems to be that it's been removed from this and it's only the houses. So I want to know the competency of a deferment or an outright refusal based on the fact that it sounds like quite a few of us are very concerned about the road safety aspect.
If we could start with Councillor Drysdale's question, I would advise against amending the condition in the way he was suggesting in order to achieve the end he was seeking. That condition is appropriate. It's the council as planning authority, and it wouldn't be satisfactory to start specifying who the decision maker should be in a planning condition. It would, however, be competent for the committee to defer consideration of this application. They could do so to allow the associated application for the access to be determined, or to allow the two matters to be brought back to a later date of this committee, so that matters could both be before the committee at the same time. The committee has, however, heard from Christy Smith that the information is already known, so it's not the case that there's extra detailed information yet to be established. The applicants have spent a long time advancing this, progressing this in consultation with the transport planning officers. So we do have the information, but if the committee was minded to, that the matters ought to be determined jointly, and that was the resolution this morning, that would be a competent disposal.
Thank you. I've some other questions.
I do accept that, and I was happy to come back to you. I am aware that Councillor Reid and Councillor Anderson still have questions, but if we could return to Councillor Wilson and allow him to finish.
I mean, I'm assuming, convener, you want us to continue with the process in the meantime.
I do. I am a stickler for process,
right.
as you know. I would prefer that everything and every box was ticked.
Right. Page 39, nothing to do with the road access. Density. Are the planning service content that the additional dwellings that have been added to the proposal for this site from the original 120 units up to now 187 is a satisfactory density?
Yes.
Consider that the site has got the capacity that will allow the necessary landscaped areas, paths, road access and SUDs, that has not been compromised?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll keep an eye on that, Convener, in due course, given what's said in paragraph 51. I'm now going to skip over the vehicle access point again. Foul drainage on page 45. Scottish Water have confirmed that foul drainage from this development will need to connect the public sewer, but are uncertain of the capacity of it at the present. Do we have any update information on that? As for approving 180 houses plus without some reassurance from Scottish Water about foul drainage, it seems to be an aspiration rather than a definite.
You'll note that they don't object, and obviously there's a separate consenting process that would require to be undertaken. So in order to receive connections, they would need to go through the process with Scottish Water, and I'm sure they would look very carefully at the situation at that time.
I think is next, page 48. Primary education is not required in this instance, as there are no capacity issues at Stanley Primary School, but given the current house building in Stanley, this proposed site and others, is that capacity issue going to pertain in the future? Have we got an answer on that?
Obviously, the site is an allocated site within the local development plan, subject to planning permission in principle, and the numbers will be included for within future projections associated to the relevant schools. And the developer obligations advisor says that there is no exceedance of projected numbers, and this can be accommodated.
Thank you. I'm on to page 51 now, and the landscaping scheme, I think proposed condition number 8. There is no reference in that proposed condition about maintained to the satisfaction of the planning authority, Convener. I sometimes will appear to be a squeaky record on that subject, but it says that we replace severely damaged or seriously diseased plants of a similar size and species after 5 years, I think. But is that a competent addition to add to that condition? The landscaping will be maintained to the satisfaction of the planning authority.
I think we've discussed that a number of times before. We certainly do not feel that that's necessary and would create a burden on the planning authority or the council that it perhaps doesn't have the ability to comply with. But I understand, and I've seen it in the past, that that has been added in. But I think our view is that it's not necessary.
Well, I have a contrary view, Convener, a strong contrary view, that it's fine to anoint things at this stage, but one of the benefits of being around for a few years is that things can come back to bite you, and then the council have no powers whatsoever about making sure that landscaping is maintained to reasonable standards. So I was asking if it was competent to add that.
There are other means of dealing with that, such as amenity notices, etc., which we have done, and I think have been through this committee as well. We can add it in. I think our advice, it serves no purpose.
Well, I just disagree, Convener. And if you've ever gone through the amenity notice process, it's cumbersome and far more time-consuming than a catch-all proposal. Convener, I've raised this before and it's been accepted. I don't want to take up a lot of time on this. It's been accepted up until now. There must be a reasoning why I'm being refused that at the moment. And I would like an explanation of that. Perhaps we could take that off this at the moment, but I will, in due course, ask for that condition to be amended. I
am happy to discuss that with you. With this application, because it applies to general applications, and we will discuss it and we'll take it forward.
And on page 53, condition 19, temporary surface water treatment facility shall remain in place until the permanent surface water drainage scheme is implemented. Would it not be better to say operational? You can implement something and it's not operational. I'm suggesting we substitute the word implemented or add implemented and operating.
We could change the word to a whole host of other words that mean the same thing, but if you want to change it to operational, we can do that. Again, I don't think there's any difference between the two, but we can change that in this particular instance if necessary.
Well, with respect, Convener, I think if it's operational, then it's a lot more than being implemented. Lots of schemes have been implemented and are not operational.
I understand the point you're making.
Okay, I will, in due course, if appropriate, move these things. And finally, just on the railway network thing on page 57, there was a reference earlier on to there are bound to be methods of dealing with water, surface water, and the railway will want to protect themselves from that. Are we content that the proposals before us today will be of sufficient robustness, if I can use that word, to make sure that we don't have a problem from Network Rail in the future?
They're designed with that in mind, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I still have Councillor Reid and Councillor Anderson on my list. Councillor Reid.
Sorry, thank you, Convener. It's going back to my original arithmetic. The open market, is it 140 or is it 134 houses? In paragraph 4, it says open market, and it's got a whole list of different types of houses. The total was given as 140, but my arithmetic makes that 134. If it is 134, what houses have been taken out the list that are not going to be built?
It is a typographical error. Total number of open market houses will be 140. I need to check the plans to see where.
So that means then that there will be extra numbers to go into these, so you don't know what they are?
Without going back and checking the detailed plans with the numbers and seeing where the differences come from.
No,
but the total is 140.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay, well, it's just that the arithmetic's wrong then. And I'm going to labour the point a wee bit, but would you agree that from the Community Council's deputation this morning, the only problem they have with this development is the vehicular access? They're quite happy with the rest of the development, but they really need to have the vehicular access nailed to be safe.
That's the focus of their comments, yes.
So they're happy with the rest of it?
You would ask that of them,
yeah.
I suppose. Yeah.
Right.
We don't feel that they have any significant issues.
It just implies then that your sort of dismissal of the fact that there were no concerns raised about the vehicular access is maybe not accurate.
The application, a comment on an application comes in against the application. It's not the officers that arbitrarily add it to whichever application they feel like. Yeah.
All we were saying is that in terms of that application, only one comment was made. We've not said, I don't think, anywhere that we don't think that anyone has an issue with the access. That's quite clear from this application.
Councillor, point made, Councillor Reid. Okay, if you could switch off your microphone. Oh. We have Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Drysdale. Sorry, Councillor Barnacle.
I'll leave mine for when we come to. I'm looking to put forward a.
At the end of questions. Yeah. Okay, but my apologies, Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I'm still concerned about the dubiety of not dealing with these two applications together, which is, I think, what the applicant sought. But leaving that aside, can I just ask a question about paragraph 51, which deals with the issue of how the master plan might go forward. This application is for more houses than the indicative plan, and you say in paragraph 51 that if things moved forward as they have with this site on some of the other sites, then some of the other sites may not be part of the master plan, or not. It might be difficult to seek approval. You then go on to say that the applicant is aware of the limit and potentially the need to seek planning permission for an increased range on the other sites. Isn't that a contradiction in terms? Surely it should be a reduced range if you've got a total capacity and you're already exceeding it on this particular site.
Well, it's not being exceeded on this particular site because the capacity relates to all sites. What the intention is in terms of the comment that's being made is that if we get to that upper limit that's related to the planning permission in principle, then they can't go beyond that without a further planning approval, which would look at the impacts and other issues associated to that.
Do we have any further questions? No, we're good. Councillor James, my apologies to Councillor James.
Sorry, Convener, thanks very much. Another one I'm a little confused with. On page 43, non-vehicular access and core paths. Paragraph 73, it says Stan 117 is proposed to connect with a proposed residential footpath network, but it's not the preferred option of the planning authority. But then it goes on to say that it's connecting with another. Can you just give us a little detail on that, please? I'm not sure if we're happy with it or not happy with it, and whether we're talking to both Stanley Development Trust and Lunkerty, who are trying to join the two villages together with a path or cycle network.
Yeah, the existing core path is in the south, comes in from the southwest corner of the site. There is a plan and aspiration to develop a new core path link with Lunkerty, which would come along the side of the Perth Road, and we have two access points, one that connects with the existing core path network and one which will connect with the future core path network. And once the new one comes in place, there is a potential then to seek to close off the other one.
Okay, I believe that's us finished questions. So, right, well, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Wilson, do apologise, but Councillor Anderson has waited because he has a comment, is a point to make, which I'm assuming will be either a motion or an amendment. So,
yes, well, I think as I'm first, I'll be the motion.
I'm getting it to him.
Yes, I would like to put forward a motion to defer until the application for roads access would come forward to this council with this application together at another date. That would be my first reason for deferment. The second reason would be a site visit by the committee is undertaken. And the third reason that the independent road safety report is present in the documents for the committee to consider.
Do you have a...
Is it competent, first of all?
Ask that. Okay, Councillor Drysdale.
I would just simply state that I'm happy to second Councillor Anderson's proposal.
It will come as no surprise that I will put up I will put up an amendment to that. The reason I want to put up an amendment to that is a couple of things. I have stated many times as the convener of this committee that I would expect our councillors to actively seek and visit a site prior to an application coming to the committee. There's no reason for us to organise main site visits. It hampers the committee to be able to make sure that it has the right members of staff, the same members of staff when we come back to reassess. So I think it is very prudent and very important that councillors on this committee, if they are concerned about something to do with an application coming forward, that they take the time and have a quick look at the site to make sure that they are aware and have seen for themselves any conditions or concerns or any access problems that that may have, so that we are not then hampered to make sure that we have the right number of councillors and the right people to make decisions at a deferred stage. We have an application in front of us. The applicants have come forward with 2 applications. They have done that because it was their hope at the time, my understanding is, it was their hope at the time to be able to actually start working on the access far quicker than the development. They were doing something honourable and laudable in an attempt to move things forward. That's already been mentioned in the deputations that have come to us. And due to our requests for additional information and our requests and discussions as a planning authority, that has not come to fruition. So it was done for the best of intentions, but we are here looking at an application for housing more than looking for an application on the access route, which is actually included in this application. It's the detailed bits that that are being assessed separately. We also have a process within our planning authority that there are certain aspects that can be dealt with under delegated powers, and we have agreed that anything more than 6 comments will come to committee, and anything prior to that will be assessed by delegated powers. And that is exactly the process that has happened here. So for those 3 points, I would like to amend that we agree the application as is, based on the information that we've been given, because we are able to do so, and that's my amendment. So, Councillor Ellingworth.
I'm happy to second that. I think that deferring the decision would not give us any more information than we have at the present.
So I now open it up to comments, and we'll go through that process. So who would like to make a comment first? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. I'm glad I asked the question during questions about the competency, because that saved a little bit of time. I strongly support Councillor Anderson's motion. I think this has been badly handled. I think, given the clear indication from the local community that there was an opportunity for both applications to be considered together, there should have been a sensitivity analysis within the planning service to actually take that point on board and present to this committee both applications together. I find it impossible, Convener, to approve in any way this application, because it, implicit in approving it, gives approval for the formation of a junction, which I certainly am extremely uncomfortable about in any shape or form. I support the idea of a site visit. I think you're right, we only pick these with selectivity. I happen to know the site very well from the last 40 or 50 years. Not that I've pretending I've lived in Stanley, but I travel the road very often by cycle and by vehicle. So, and I think that we should have had both the reports coming forward. I think the committee, I'm glad we're able to make that decision, that these reports, and we can give it all due consideration. I would just suggest to Councillor Anderson that the site visit is unaccompanied. In other words, we're not asking for the applicant and the community council, everybody else to be there. We're there in a fact-finding mission. And I think looking at this key site will do no harm. It's an exercise in democracy, Convener, and that's one we should exercise from time to time.
Councillor James, then Councillor Purvis.
Thanks very much, Convener. I too will be supporting Councillor Anderson's motion to defer. Stanley's a wonderful village, and every organisation within that village is very supportive of everything that happens. They've been very supportive of Muir Homes development in Strathmore in the Lynn Road. And they're still very supportive of this development. but we should be taking notice of them when they show their concerns over what they can see potentially happening and the danger of it all. As somebody who travels that road every day, you can have as many safety features as you want. It doesn't make it any safer. And it doesn't. I think it's in the position it's in. It's on a brow of a hill. You've got two real sharp corners at either end, and you've got residents on the opposite side of the road. Okay, 3 or 4 residents, but residents nonetheless who are also trying to access that road, which is very, very busy. So I will be supporting Councillor Anderson's motion.
Mr. Purvis, then Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Convener. Simply to echo some of the comments that have already been made, I will also be supporting Councillor Anderson's motion. I'd just like to make the point that just because something can be done under delegated powers does not mean that it should be done under delegated powers. I think we do have to have a bit of flexibility, which is allowed for, particularly when whatever the good intentions of the developer in splitting up these applications, clearly one of the key points and the key points raised in the objection to this application relate to another application. And I think it's only right and proper that in instances like that, that officers should decide to combine those, not combine the applications formally, but to bring them forward to this committee at the same time for determination so that we can make an informed decision about them.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, I've got to say I rather support the amendment here. Simply, I do fully appreciate the local community's concerns because new junctions are highly emotive simply because they might be seen as a danger because we are used to what we've got. Something new might not be to our liking. However, dangerous junctions, dangerous roads are caused by 2 simple things, and one is impatience and the other is speed. And most new junctions actually tend to slow traffic down. And as I have seen from the plans, etc., for the actual junction layout on the actual B9099, great attempts are being made to mitigate speed and danger. And I cannot see what will be gained by simply deferring, holding back, visiting the site. As you suggested yourself, visiting the site is something we're at liberty to do anyway prior to this meeting. And I've just failed to see anything to be gained by a deferment, and I'm happy to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Drysdale, you want to make a comment? Is this because you'll get a chance to say as
I simply wanted to make reference to Councillor Wilson's comments in relation to the suggested amendment to the motion, and I would support Councillor Wilson's suggested amendment, which was that it would be an unaccompanied visit. That was all.
Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah, just very briefly, I will support Councillor Anderson's motion. I believe that the views of the local members that have been expressed today, and also the points made by Councillors Purvis and Wilson regarding the procedure, in fact, of wanting to look at this together because the junction issue is so paramount to the Development Trust and the Community Council, I'm happy to support the motion.
Do we have any further comments? No? Councillor Anderson, as the mover, you're allowed to sum up.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I've been listening to various comments. I know we can't micromanage these things, and I admit that the road safety team do a good job, but it's just, we need a site visit because I've driven that road loads of times, and I've driven it recently, but it's, you know, you've got it, until you see this plan and work out just what's happening and actually go on site, and there'll be officers with us. And I remember the last site visit I was on, we actually discussed it with the guys and we said, well, can we do something here, can we do something there? And there was various small changes made that made people more comfortable in accepting what was done. I mean, people are concerned about the bus stop. Well, you need to actually go out and find out exactly where that's going to be in relation to it. Now, we didn't have that. You know, it would be far better, and it's far better if all the members is there, because some members perhaps hasn't done it. So that is why I suggested a site visit. A lot of people have missed out the independent road safety report. Well, we've heard from representation from the community about the amount of volume of traffic, etc. Perhaps there'll be some detail in that from a more professional with a report being done. If it can give us an idea on the volumes of traffic, then we can make an informed decision on that. And, you know, the application of the road access, I'm very uncomfortable with making a decision on a very big development that then, because it has been accepted and nobody's objecting to these houses, so you know, that we're going to put that through, and then we have no control over this road access. So
we have had a sum up now.
It's just on
Councillor
a
Purvis.
point of order, convener.
Yeah.
It was just to clarify whether Councillor Anderson had agreed to incorporate the suggestion from Councillor Wilson.
I'm happy to make it yes. Yeah. Happy to incorporate the Councillor Wilson's suggestion. Sorry.
Okay. Over to the vote.
Yes. Councillors, just before we, or my colleague Danny Williams takes the vote, can I just clarify, because there's often an inherent ambiguity when the committee defers for a site visit to take place. Is the application be deferred to allow those members wishing to take the opportunity of a site visit so to do, or is it expected by the committee that those who will be subsequently voting in it shall be required to attend the site visit as a condition of subsequently voting? It would just be helpful if we ascertain that, so that there's not that doubt after the site visit has taken place when it reconvenes. I mean, I'm conscious from what's said this morning that some have said they're already very well familiar with it and pass it on a daily basis, and they're maybe not in the same position as others. So it may be that it's preferred to keep it as an option, but it would be extremely helpful to understand now whether or not it's going to be a requirement imposed on those to be voting.
If my motion was successful, I would have hoped that everybody would attend a site visit. As I say, you can go out and visit things, but until you've now seen all this, I think it would be good for everyone, if possible. Nobody can be forced to do a site visit, we know that, but it would be good if it was by the committee.
The issue is whether or not, not that they're forced to, it's whether or not, in order to vote, they should be required to attend the site visit, and that's what I'm seeking clarification of from the committee.
Yes, I think we should.
Okay. Yeah, the understanding that has come back there that the mover and seconder are wanting that a site visit is done, and that to be able or eligible to vote on this application that you must attend that site visit.
In which case, convener, the motion is by Councillor Anderson, which is to defer the application for three purposes. Firstly, to allow the current application and the application for the road access to come forward at the same date to a later committee. Secondly, to allow a site visit to be undertaken by members of the committee to be voting on the application. And thirdly, for a copy of the independent road safety audit to be presented at a future meeting of both applications. And that motion is seconded by Councillor Drysdale. The amendment is your own, convener, which is to approve the application in accordance with the recommendations by the Head of Planning and Development, and that amendment is seconded by Councillor Illingworth. We'll now have a roll call vote.
Okay, good morning, members. In line with Council's standing orders, we'll now go to a roll call vote. If you can let me know when I call your name, whether you'll be voting for the motion, as proposed by Councillor Anderson, or the amendment as proposed by the convener? Excuse me. Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Barnacle.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
And Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Okay, convener, so there is 8 votes in favour of the motion and 3 in favour of the amendment, so it will be the motion that carries.
Been asked for a 5-minute comfort break. Committee, do I have your agreement that we change the order of and assess the PANs right now? Well, we'll certainly take the first one. That will allow us to continue with the business until Councillor Barnacle. Here he is. Welcome back, Councillor Barnacle. Okay, thank you. Right, that allows us to proceed with the business in front of us. We're on to local applications, and the first application in front of us is change of use of a dwelling house, Class 9, to a guest house, Class 7, in Woodcroft, Bellwood Park in Perth. And I'd like to ask Mrs Conliffe to speak to the report.
Thank you, Convener. This first slide shows the layout of the proposed site with Dundee Road to the west of the screen. Bellwood Park is a no-through road which takes you access from Dundee Road and serves approximately 12 dwelling houses. You can see on this layout from the plot sizes that the predominant feature in the area are large detached dwelling houses and correspondingly large plots. Woodcroft, which is subject of the application, is located near the top end of the road on the southern end of the site, and similar to the other ones, reflects the same pattern. The proposal is for a change of use of this property from dwelling house to guest house. This slide is looking in a westerly direction from Bellwood Park to the junction with Dundee Road. And I've got a series of slides which just show coming up the road. So this one is now looking the other way. So this is from the junction of Dundee Road looking up Bellwood Park. And you can see that the road bends and rises quite steeply and is quite a wide road. And this is continuing further round the bend as we travel up towards the site. The tree, the Chilean pine tree, or monkey puzzle tree as I know it, in the middle of the screen is actually in the application site. So it's a good landmark and point of reference at the moment as we come up the road. And this is, you can see the tree there, and this is a property of Woodcroft, which is subject of the application, with the double garage. The 2 black doors that you see there are part of the application site, and there is a further parking area beyond that, which would allow for 2 off-street car parking bays. And this is the area that I was speaking about, which is the additional parking area just up from what was the double garage. Finally, we're just looking across to the property of Woodcroft, as I say, a large detached property in substantial garden ground, and back to the layout plan. Thank you.
Thank you. We have deputations on this application, so could I invite Mr Cumming to come forward to make the deputation. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Apologies for the delay. As with all deputations, you'll have 5 minutes. You'll be notified when you have a minute left to go, and hopefully you'll be able to answer some questions from the committee once you've finished. Thank you.
Thank you. First, let me say that I'm speaking on behalf of all of the objectors. I'm not giving a viewpoint that is mine alone. I'm talking of all of the 20 or so objectors to this proposal. We believe that the proposed change of use is contrary to in respect to the local development plan. Time constraints mean I can only mention a few. In particular, the commercialisation of Bellwood Park will intensify the volume of traffic where two subsidiary roads meet the Dundee Road. There are blind spots in all directions at this junction, with dangers to both vehicle users and pedestrians. This is contrary to the requirements of Part 1A and Part 1B of Policy 1, which require that the property is safely accessible. That area, including part of Bellwood Park, is in the Council's ownership. There are no road signs within that area to warn of the dangers, no giveaway sign, no halt sign, nothing. The traffic intensification will increase the danger for everyone, not least for visiting hotel guests totally unfamiliar with the junction. The proposal will have a negative impact on the privacy and amenity of the surrounding properties and makes no efforts to mitigate that loss of privacy and amenity as required in Policy 1B. Neighbouring families will have strangers staring into the houses and gardens, including from upper windows, on a daily basis, impinging directly on the right of privacy and their ability to enjoy the amenity of their homes and gardens. The applicant suggests that the commercialisation is compliant with Policy 17, Residential Areas Part D, which requires residential amenity to be protected. However, it is not compatible with the amenity and character of Bellwood Park. It fails the general test set out in the categories of development listed within that policy, so must fail the policy as a whole. The applicant contends that the change of use will have no impact upon the conservation area within which the property sits. This is just wrong. The legislative test for development within such areas must take into account the setting of those areas. The commercialisation of Bellwood Park will adversely affect the setting and character of the conservation area, rather than preserve or enhance it, as required in Policy 28. The applicant has provided no evidence to demonstrate compliance with Policy 60, the Transport Standards and Accessibility Part B, and that it does not demonstrate how it will take into account the safety of all existing and potential users of Bellwood Park. These are only a few of our items. The Planning Officer's report is flawed in several key areas. For example, the application, para 38, states that 4 off-street parking places are available, 2 in tandem format and 2 in a double garage, which is never used for parking purposes. The Planning Officer believes that this most unusual setup is sufficient for 2 resident vehicles and 4 guest vehicles. By my maths, that's just not possible. The comments with regard to travel and safety issues, travel and traffic issues, paras 36 and 37, are somewhat fanciful. The report states that the proposed guest house is conveniently placed for the walking and cycling core path, the rail station, and the local bus, and suggests that only some residents will travel by car. It's simply not correct to conclude that a 4-bedroom guest house will not generate significant levels of additional traffic in comparison to a private dwelling.
You have 1 minute, sir.
It is extremely unlikely, if not entirely inconceivable, that would ever be more than 6 cars on a regular basis at a home of this size. The report states in para 32 that this type of development is common within residential areas. They may be common in arterial roads, but they're certainly not common in the heart of our communities. If you look at booking.com, you will see that virtually every hotel listed on that site for Perth is on a through road. The report in para 39 suggests that public safety is the responsibility of the individual driver and is not a planning issue. We disagree. Public safety must be paramount in all decision making. In summary, the application breaches several policies in a local development plan, and the views of the Planning Officer are based upon a significant number of flawed assumptions. The vision statement that forms the cornerstone of the development plan says...
Could you wind up, please, Nelson?
I'll do that now. You know the vision plan. We say you should stand by that vision plan and reject the application. The proposed commercialisation fails to meet the requirements of the plan and completely fails to match the aspirations of the vision statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Are you happy to take questions?
I am indeed.
Okay, I open up to questions. Do we have any questions for Mr. Cumming? Councillor Illingworth, then Councillor Wilson.
Is there any shortage of parking on Bellwood Park, on street?
There is shorting of good quality parking. A lot of the parking impinges on the other neighbours' ability to reverse out of their garages or drive into their garages. Yes, there is parking, but there's very little good quality parking because there are a number of garages, just like you saw there, all along the street. You have to reverse out of your garage and get across the street. If you can't get across the street because somebody's chosen to park opposite you, it's a problem, yes.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Just good morning, yeah. Bellwood Park is a private road at the moment?
It is privately owned, but it is a public road. It has public lighting. It is served by the public service vans. The refuse lorry reverses all the way up Bellwood Park twice a week to collect refuse. So it is privately owned, but it is a public road.
But the solum of the road is privately owned?
It is privately owned, correct.
And do the joint residents have any parking controls over it, or is it just a case of you let it just happen?
It has existed there for so long that there are no formal controls. Everyone works together. Yes. Okay. That's only part of our problem. Our big part of the problem is that the bottom part of the road belongs to the council. It's not in private ownership. The council owns the bit at the bottom of the road where there are no signs, no giveaway, nothing. That's in the council's ownership.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions for Mr. Cumming? No, sir, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Councillor Heron. Again, thank you for your time and sorry for the delay. As with all deputations, you have 5 minutes. You'll be notified with a minute left to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, convener and colleagues. Thank you very much for allowing me to have this deputation in support of the residents of Bellwood Park. I've been working with these residents for a couple of years on various issues regarding not just this proposal but other applications by the applicant and with enforcement issues that have been passed to planning officers as a result of those applications. You've already heard from Bob, who has spoken on behalf of the residents, and I submit the following in support of their objection. After reviewing the application and the public responses to it and meetings with residents, I was concerned that there are a number of points where the application is contrary to both the principles and details of the Council's development plans, both the TAY Plan, Strategic Development Plan 2016 to 2036, and the current Perth Kinross Local Development Plan of 2019. Bob has highlighted many of the areas in his submission where the proposed commercialisation of residential district is contrary to those key documents, and I fully endorse his comments. I would also like to pick out several of the paragraphs in the application, notably paragraph 45, where it says it is noted that Woodcroft is a private road. The control of use of the private road is a civil matter between the applicant and the owner. However, we have 4 paragraphs that go on to various aspects of that road and the parking on paragraphs 38 to 41. The Canal Conservation Area is a very precious asset, and our strategy plan demands that we protect these assets. There is no question that it draws people to visit and live in Perth, and this is not just my view, it's not the residents' view, it's a view cast in stone, or at least in black ink, in our key development plans. Those who have chosen to live in these residential areas have a basic right to privacy and the right to enjoy the amenity of their homes and gardens. Our development plan emphasises those rights point after point. It's in Perth's interest for us to protect these assets for current and future residents. The TAY Plan extols the vision of a sustainable and vibrant Perth and Kinross with protected assets, and I've noted there are 2 businesses on the main arterial road close to the applicant that are clearly not sustainable or vibrant. One of these is up for sale for a considerable period of time, and another is closed and is now an empty building. Both are in very prominent positions for any visitor coming into Perth. By approving an application for change of use to a property that is currently designated as residential and possibly setting a precedent for other residential properties and neighbourhoods, the Council would simply increase the supply in a market that is already struggling and oversubscribed. In doing so, the council risks ruining a unique and highly desirable residential street close to the city centre. It is simply not right for this rare asset to be jeopardised in order to facilitate the business ambitions of one individual. Surely this would be in breach of our commitments in regard to sustainability and protection of assets are laid out in the key planning documents if this application is improved. The issue that troubles the objectors most of all is the issue of public safety with the four-way junction and the multiple blind spots. You've seen photographs of that road earlier. What you didn't see was the actual junction itself where there's a blind other access that comes down from the left-hand side as you're coming down Bellwood Park. For avoidance of doubt, let me emphasise that although most of Bellwood Park is in private ownership, it is still a public road and a critical section of the road is wholly owned by the council. The council owns a section of road where there's no warning signs, the section of road at the heart of what's described by the residents as the danger zone. These dangers are not exaggerated or imaginary. There was actually an accident there last week where two cars collided right in the middle of the junction. The residents of Bellwood Park do everything they can to mitigate the dangers in their privately owned section of the road. They provide their own grit bins, they fill those bins at their own expense, and they spread that grit with their own efforts. They do everything they can to keep everyone safe. However, we cannot ignore our responsibilities in both the privately owned and council-owned sections of the road. We cannot just stand by and say that the commercialisation of Bellwood Park and the intensification of traffic at that junction is nothing to do with us. It is our problem for two reasons. This is a unique residential asset that we have a duty to protect for the district of Perth and Kinross, and there's a very real traffic dangers and therefore liabilities for the council. I therefore ask you to support the residents in their objection to this planning application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Councillor Hearn? Councillor James?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Hearn, for your presentation. Has anybody spoken from the community? Has anybody spoken to the owner of this property and expressed their concerns?
I'm not too sure whether there have been conversations. There have been issues between communication between other residents and the owners of that property. So I don't think conversations would have been harmonious, let's put it that way.
Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Councillor Hearn. Thanks for your comments. You said at the start of your speech there about enforcement issues. Can you say a little bit more about that?
There are other applications that have been put in for that property. I don't think it would be appropriate to mention those as they are not part of this application, and the enforcement actions were as a result of the previous planning applications that have been put in. So I think it would be totally inappropriate for me to go into those in this instance.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks for your presentation, Councillor. On the introduction to the report on the first page, it indicates that the applicant seeks a change from class 9 to 7, but a certificate of lawfulness was granted in October 2018, which confirmed that the applicant could utilise 2 of the bedrooms. So in current terms, is it your understanding that in effect the number of bedrooms that could be allowed for guests would go from 2 to 4 rather than from 0 to 4?
Correct.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Linworth. Yes.
Do you have any estimate of the number of extra vehicles per day that this change from 2 to 4 bedrooms would entail?
If you've got a couple with 2 cars for 1 bedroom, that's an extra 4. If you've got 2 couples with 2 cars, that's 2. I don't know. The only in the application itself, it turns around and says in paragraph 38, I think it is, that you would only have extra vehicles at 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. They would only allow check-in at 11 and they would allow check-out at 2. I don't know any guest house I've ever been to or any place, hotel or anything where you have a specific time to go in and out. You may have a time to go before or a time to leave after.
Councillor Brown?
Good afternoon, Councillor. Just a quick thing. you and Mr. Cumming both used the term commercialisation. There is no structural change to the building at all. It's just a house that's being used as a bed and breakfast. So the term commercialisation seems a bit exaggerated to me.
It's a business.
It is business, but there's no change to the actual building. It's just going to be a house which is used as bedrooms for bed and breakfast. The commercialisation would imply it's been changed into a...
There's no physical change to the building. It's changing from a residential to a business. You have a residential area with the residential houses, and you're changing it to allow a business.
But many bed and breakfasts are in residential areas.
Can I ask if it's a question?
Sorry, yes, I would not agree that most bed and breakfasts are in residential areas. That's the attraction of them.
It's a bed and breakfast at the moment. It's not a guest house at the moment. A guest house is a business. That's why they're asking for change of use.
Okay, fine. Okay.
Councillor Gray, then Councillor Wilson again.
Could you clarify which policies of the LDP this contravenes?
Please, yes. I did have it. Policy 17, residential areas. Policy 60, transport standards and accessibility. And I think the two, policy 1 and 1A, which was mentioned by Bob in his submission. 1A and 1B of policy 1.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thanks. Sorry, I meant to ask as a follow-up question. Given that there is a two-bedroom bed and breakfast establishment already there, is there any evidence on the ground of issues with traffic and parking?
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate on that, please?
Directly across the road from there is a two-door garage that belongs to the property opposite, and they've had issues in the past of having to get access in and from there because they tend to park their cars directly opposite those gates.
Okay, so the parking's on the roadway?
Yes.
And we've heard about from the report about there being capacity within the premise for parking. In your view, is that capacity, does that exist in practicality or theory?
The garages aren't used, and I don't think you're going to get 2 or 4 cars in that driveway that you've seen in the photograph with the owner's vehicles in there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? No. Councillor Heron, thank you very much for your time this morning, this afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open up to questions to officers. Do we have any questions on this application? Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm a bit puzzled that we have a major road down at the bottom and no road signs. Can you confirm that there's no road signs at the bottom of Bellwood Park?
That is correct. There are no road signs. However, that is common across many of the roads in Perth Kinross. If you go up to Fairmont Street, just further up the road, or Fairmont Road, sorry, that's exactly the same. There are road markings there which require you to give way, which is not uncommon.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. The para 37, I think, of the report. Given the scale of the guest house, it would not require servicing by commercial vehicles. Would this not qualify for commercial waste collection rather than domestic waste collection, Convener?
Our comments from the waste team was that it wouldn't be any different. The waste truck already goes up the Bellwood Park, and that would continue for this development.
On the same page, Convener, para 36, just above that, the site is also within walking distance of Perth Railway Station. I was a wee bit surprised at that. Are there any other comments you would want to, the officers would want to, transport officers would want to add to that, given that it's not the most easily located place for the railway station, in my opinion, but it may be that the planning officer had a view that particularly fit hikers who are going to dash off the train and go here for bed and breakfast. I don't know. I just want a bit more explanation of that.
Is it possible? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I would fully agree that you wouldn't suggest that the railway station is next door to it. I think it came partly from the applicant's information, where they've had a number of people who have come to the premises from the railway station and taken a taxi. What you also have is that it is close to the core path, which takes you down, and then you can walk quite easily that way across the railway bridge and then up Marshall Place to the railway station. But I would agree that it's certainly not just round the corner.
I thank Mrs Concliffe for that description. I agree. I take the point about the core path totally.
Do we have any further questions for, sorry, Councillor Braun?
Just a quick question for officers. Do we have any idea of how busy, has there been any indication of how busy the guest house is, or the house is, occupancy rates, what sort of level it is at the moment, for example?
Yes, as was mentioned in the deputations, in terms of the application site, the property is currently being used as a bed and breakfast establishment, and it does have permitted development rights because of the size of the property. Any property that has more than four or more bedrooms can use 2 bedrooms without requiring any change of use of planning. And the applicant has been operating in that way in the past. The applicant's own statement has suggested that using 2 bedrooms that she has been doing, in 2019 the occupancy rate was 28%.
Again, any further questions? No, thank you. Okay, I will, based on the information that we've been given and listening to the deputations, I would like to move the paper. I know that's not what the community will be wanting, but I'm moving in accordance with the proposal put forward. It is already a bed and breakfast. It is looking at having the option of being able to put itself forward as a guest house. That doesn't state that there will always be 4 bedrooms constantly used. If it was a residential property, it is perfectly within its legal right to have every bedroom occupied, and perfectly within as a residential property to have cars coming in and out, etc. I can't see any reason, even though I think both deputations came across with some good points, that in my opinion it doesn't actually, I don't actually agree with them on the policies 1760 and 1A and 1B. So I'm putting forward the motion as it stands. Councillor Illingworth.
I'm happy to second that motion.
Do we have an amendment? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. I just want to test the committee because I think there's an issue of principle and precedent about this. I have concerns about this. We've heard some of the concerns about traffic and parking, but I think, and the Vice Convener did ask a question about commercialisation, but I can understand how in what is predominantly a residential street at the moment, maybe the creep of commercialisation, if I can call it that, is a potential issue. So I'm going to move refusal on policy 1A, which I think is self-explanatory, and I'm looking at 1B to find which, because as you correctly say, Convener, the building exists in its entirety, so it's really the impact of any use rather than the building itself. I think my motion would, my amendment rather, would be based on 1A.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Sorry, maybe just before we go on, I'm just looking now. I'll be kept right by my planning colleagues on my right, but because I only have in front of me the proposed local development plan, I don't think the wording changed as we progressed on to the adopted plan. But with that caveat, the there's no change to the design. So the second paragraph, which does talk about design, density and siting, don't apply. But the first paragraph says the developments contribute positively to the quality of the surrounding and built natural environment. Is that what?
Yes, sorry, I should have been clarified that. Para 1 of Policy 1A.
Okay, because I take it Councillor Wilson's position is that the change of use is not a positive contribution to the surrounding built and natural environment.
Correct.
And it's that policy criterion only is the basis for his refusal?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? No. Unfortunately, no seconder, Councillor Wilson. So in that case, the application is approved. Thank you. And I know that's not what the residents would like to hear, but I do appreciate them coming along today. Okay. Okay. We have a couple of councillors that have to leave. Thank you. So this brings us on to the next application in front of us, which is the erection of a switch room facility and associated works, S42, to modify condition 5 on landscaping and planting of permission that was granted on 162230 in Cooper Angus Substation, Pleasance Road in Cooper Angus. And I would like to ask Mr. Smith to speak to the report.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just quickly take you through a number of slides here. So the first slide, as we see it, shows the site in itself. Now that's the overall site which relates to the original planning permission, with the area associated to the switch room shown in blue, temporary works compound in green, which has since been decommissioned, and the overall substation site is in red, but really the area of interest is that in blue. Second slide here, you see the currently approved landscaping proposals with the hedgerow planting required by that previous permission. If you refer that back to the previous drawing, it's just round the edges of the switch room site. This is the current proposal before us, with the dark green indicating a native scrub area to the north and south, lighter green a species-rich grass along the west side, with the circular groups indicating native scrub planting, while the grey triangles are bird boxes. The first photograph here looks east along that existing southern boundary. The brown building you see there is the switch room itself, to which the landscaping related. The next photograph looks west along that southern boundary, with trees in the distance flanking the A94. The next slide shows a view looking north along the east boundary down the access track. You see the council vehicle there that was used to access the site. This slide looks southwest across the substation, indicating the scale of the facility. If you look carefully, you can see the brown-clad switch room in the middle left portion behind quite a bit of other equipment. This next slide shows a view along the north, or a view north along the west boundary where the scrub planting is to take place. The next slide shows the northern boundary west towards, again, the A94 where the trees are. Then again we see the access track with undulating ground to the right, beyond which are the nearest residential properties. You might remember that view from the application that we considered in relation to the battery storage facility. This is a view south from Pleasance Road towards the substation, the smaller power lines leading the eye towards it, with the taller pylon visible above the horizon. That is actually at the substation itself. This is a closer view, seeing again the large pylon looking south towards the substation from the access track, and again we take it back to the site with, again in blue, the area of consideration.
Thank you. We have a deputation on this application. So could I ask Mr. D and Mr. S is all I have. Right. Do I have first names? Galloway, to come forward to make the deputation. Gentlemen, as with everybody else, you've been very patient sitting there watching everybody else. But as with everybody else, you have 5 minutes to do a joint presentation. You'll be notified when there's a minute left, and if you're available to answer questions, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. The Cooperangus substation used to be surrounded on all sides by thick and tall evergreen trees, which hid the equipment and allowed it to blend into the rural landscape. In 2016, when the new switch room was erected on the site, all these trees were removed by SSE. The subsequent substation upgrading work has installed new transformers and equipment which are taller than the equipment that they replaced. Since then, we, as one of the closest neighbours to the substation, have been asking SSE to return the planting to its previous state. On the 12th of February 2018, Mr. George Leggett, the lead land manager of SSE, met with us on site to request access over our land to allow the installation of the 2 new transformers. During this meeting, we were given a promise confirmed on the 22nd of February 2018 in writing by Mr. Leggett that by the time the upgrading works had been completed, the trees around the substation would have been planted to hide the visual impact of the buildings and the equipment on site to the same level of coverage as before the upgrading work commenced. I have this written assurance here, if you'd like to see it, as it was offered in my objection letter. So here is my 12th of February email to Mr. Leggett confirming the agreed reinstatement of the planting. And here is Mr. Leggett's reply in writing, stating, I can confirm that your email of the 12th of February is an accurate summary of what was discussed. Since then, for over 2 years, we've been asking SSE to present a planting plan which honours this agreement to return the substation planting to its former state. All of the planting plans shown to us by SSE have been unacceptable as they fail to shield the site from all 4 sides. The latest proposed planting scheme under consideration today again fails to do this. We understand the reason for this, notwithstanding our written commitment from SSE, is that the new underground and overground cabling now prevents tree planting in some substantial areas of the site. Apart from the obvious question mark over the integrity of SSE to promise in writing something that it actually had no intention or ability of being able to fulfill, which is something we believe the Council should take a view on, our intention in coming here today is to ensure that all the available planting options have been adequately considered. The main issue is that there are areas within the substation boundary that are no longer suitable for tree planting. And we're talking here about trees, not shrubs or flowers, because it's only trees that are going to be able to cover or mask the 6-metre high transformer equipment and other equipment in the compound. However, the recent Perth Kinross Council approval of the planting plan for the proposed neighbouring battery storage facility shows that the Council can insist on planting options outside of the site boundary. In the case of the battery storage facility, which is essentially exactly the same site as you've mentioned, the Council has required the planting of 178 trees, 696 metres of hedgerows and over 1,000 square metres of native woodland, the majority of which is outside of the development site boundary. So this planting plan was described by the Council as a robust and comprehensive native planting plan and as an exemplar, making valuable contribution to biodiversity. Why would it be that for a proposed development not even yet built, such an extensive tree planting plan can be a compulsory requirement, when on the same site, for a facility which has stood for 5 years now with absolutely no screening, the same standards and requirements would not be stipulated? Further, this planning approval itself recommends, this planning approval recommendation even states that the landscaping proposed as part of the battery storage would further enhance and improve the situation.
1 minute.
Thank you. Therefore, the only logical conclusion one can draw is that that same tree planting should be insisted on as part of this substation screening as of the battery storage. We would strongly request that you look at where these 2 planting plans overlap in terms of lines of visibility on all 4 sides of the substation and require the planting plan to be upgraded to include additional tree planting outside the substation boundary such that its impact on the rural landscape can be reduced in exactly the same way as you have insisted for the approved battery storage development, and which was promised in writing by SSE to us over 2 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll open up to questions. Do we have any questions? Councillor Wilson, I look to you because you normally do.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm trying to get my head around the detail of this. Are you suggesting that the proposal for the type of species planting that's outlined in paragraphs 29 and 30 isn't tall enough or big enough or robust enough to mask, I won't say hide, but mask what is an industrial, almost industrial type of facility?
Yes. They are on in some areas, although I don't think this particular plan shows in as much detail as the one that we received more latterly from SSE in terms of the heights and so forth of species. But there are large areas where there are no trees. It's just wild meadow, flowers and shrubs are proposed. And there is an area on the east side down here where there is no planting at all, and that's visible from Pleasance Road as you drive along the top.
And is that land in the ownership of SSE or in the control of SSE?
Which land, sorry?
The land on the east that you've just referred to.
Here, yes, and if you remember the one that had the box over here.
Yeah.
That land down there, yes, where the cursor is in the ownership of SSE. We understand that that's the area where there's some issues about underground cabling, and therefore that's why we're suggesting that in this area, but also across on the other side where there are, I think, cables going across to the main Cooper Angus Road, that planting outside of this area, immediate area, as was recommended and required by yourselves for the battery storage, and on the same land that is owned by the landowner who would be required to plant those trees, is applied to this proposal. That's all.
And that area of ground is out with SSE's immediate control?
Yes, it is.
But available?
Well, when the battery storage facility was approved, one of the things that we asked was, how can you guarantee the planting of trees that was one of our objections, on land that is outside the control of the developer, which was the battery storage. And these trees and the planting that I quoted here are almost all on land outside the control of that developer, and would be overlap in some cases.
Which we think is actually a potentially positive solution, because we're looking at an approved planting plan that was an exemplar that was insisted upon for a facility that might not ever be built, but that has been approved, that would serve a dual function. And if it were ever approved and commissioned, the planting would therefore be established and would be better anyway. Right. So there's an opportunity, we feel, to be recognising that there are constraints that prevent the previous planting, which was fantastic and screened this industrial site completely. There's an opportunity here to combine the plans we suggest and do something more robust, and also be ahead of the game if the battery storage were developed.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any further? Councillor Purvis, then Councillor Barnacle.
Thank you, and I may need to ask some similar questions later on of officers. Notwithstanding the fact that it's disappointing that SSE have given you a commitment and don't seem to have followed that through when they're putting in their application, so I completely sympathise with that point. I suppose my concern is, here we have an application for a variation of condition, which is for, if I'm understanding it correctly, more planting than the original application, which has approval. I'm just wondering if we were to change the condition to have more planting, presumably there's no incentive for SSE then to do it. They would just go by the original application. Is that right? Well, I suppose that's the question for officers later, but if that is the case, if trying to help you here, what could we actually do to address your concerns?
One of the interesting points about this, I think, is the original proposal was actually for basically some hedges around the switch room which was installed. What doesn't seem to be documented is the fact that all of the trees that were previously around the substation itself were removed, independent of that, independent of the switch room development. There doesn't seem to be any requirement for that screening to have been replaced. In our communications with SSE, this has almost stimulated them to produce, therefore, a planting plan, which we feel has some shortcomings. But we feel that there is a solution to these shortcomings being addressed, which is some of the things that we've been talking about today. But we certainly wouldn't want to compromise their willingness to plant where they can. We just want reassurance that the trees are going to be large enough, that the density is going where they are planted is going to be thick enough, and some measures are taken from those lines of sight that aren't now possible to address that issue.
I suppose, not to get into comment, but my concern is that if we move for refusal, you might end up with less than what you were already going to get. That's still your position, that you're asking for a refusal of the application?
Sorry, the words that we used was that we're looking for an upgrade or an amendment to this, which would then allow the substation to be screened in the way similar to that which it was before.
Councillor Barnacle?
Yeah, it's really following up on that, because in paragraph 30 it says, "It is not intended or expected that any landscaping could completely screen the substation. Rather, it would reduce the overall landscape impact." And in the paragraph before, the objectors have requested a more robust planting plan be agreed to effectively screen it on all sides. So it's not going to do that. This proposal is not going to screen it on all sides, but you were saying that at one point it was screened on all sides.
Totally, yeah.
And you see no reason why that couldn't actually happen again.
We understand why we don't think SSE are being deliberately obstructive in not offering to do it. I think that the upgrade work they did installed underground and overground cables, which precludes the reinstatement of tall trees at certain points within the boundary.
But they could be done outside.
Not only can they be done outside, a plan that insists upon that has already been approved in this chamber for the battery storage. And what we're saying is that the logical thing to do would be insist on that, those parts of that plan for the battery storage that effectively screen this, and especially those parts that screen the areas that will be left most exposed by the inability of SSE to screen them. That's what we're trying to say.
I understand. Thanks. Yeah.
We're trying to propose solutions, not just object. We're trying to propose something positive.
Okay. Do we have any further questions? No. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you. Okay, we'll open it up to officers for questions. Councillor Purvis, then Councillor.
Thank you, and this is perhaps a question for Mr. Fogg on the back of the questions I was asking of the deputations. We obviously have this application for a variation of a condition. First, is it competent for us to condition to ask SSE to reinstate the planting to what it was prior to the previous application with the upgrades? And secondly, if this application is approved or it was approved with a different condition, could SSE still build to the or do the landscaping to the original application?
I think, in fact, Christian Smith's greater knowledge of the history means he's better able to answer some of those queries. As I understand it, the works that have been carried out to date have the effect that they can't provide complete landscaping as was originally intended over land within their control. So in that respect, as I understand it, and no doubt Christian Smith will clarify this, the original proposal is not now an option. But perhaps it might be better if, rather than me guessing, you got a more confident answer from Christian.
Yeah, that's generally, I think, is contained in the report, and I think SSE were hoping to do a deputation today, but with various events going on, they're unable to do so. The situation, I've got this slide up on the screen again there, that there is an area of hedging was proposed around the immediacy of the enclosure of the switch room for various reasons associated to underground cabling and proximity, as well as land ownership. They're no longer able to do that. What we need to be aware of as well is that the condition relates to the development of the switch room, not the substation in its entirety. So we can only look at what landscaping would be appropriate relative to the switch room.
Thanks for that answer. I suppose and maybe I've misunderstood what the deputation was saying, but has landscaping that was previously obscuring the substation, not just the switch room, been removed as part of the previous application?
Yes, I think as part of, or in the lead up to upgrading the substation, trees were removed. Those trees were not subject to a TPO or within a conservation area, so they didn't come under planning control. My understanding is, and you could maybe ask further questions on that, that those trees were within the area outlined in red. It's no longer possible for various reasons to undertake that more extensive planting as the substation in itself had increased. The suggestion now would indicate that land under separate ownership out with the site should be included to have a similar effect, perhaps by having a larger donut around the substation, but that land is not under the control of SSE.
Okay, and to follow on from that, can I ask, it was raised in the deputation about the battery farm and the fact that planting had been required out with the boundary. Was that just out with the boundary, or was that also out with the ownership of the applicant?
Sorry, I was going to just answer that. My understanding of that was that due to the deals being done by the developer and the landowner, that it was all on the landowner's land, so it was part of the negotiation. So it wasn't within their ownership, but it was within the scope of the negotiation going on. But you can add to that.
That's what they proposed to us, and we accepted it. So yes, it was an exemplar. It perhaps went beyond what we would have asked for. But yes, the land for the site of the battery storage facility and the land on which the landscaping was to be provided, some at some considerable distance from that, was all under the same ownership. And that ownership was in agreement with the proponents of the battery storage scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, did that answer all your questions? I wasn't sure whether the question, whether they would be able to revert back to the previous agreed.
Well, I suppose that it's dealt with by the first one, and that the planting within that site isn't feasible.
If you're happy with all the answers, that's fine. Okay, that brings on to Councillor Anderson.
Yes, without SSE or whatever being here, maybe there's nobody can answer this question, but it's a shame that the trees were removed. But I can see with the development of the substation that my question would be, was the trees removed because there's a risk of them being too close to the new development and live cables, which would be a major issue? And is this why there won't be trees planted unless they were able to find land slightly further away from the substation that would do the adequate screening?
There's a number of reasons why what has happened and what is now proposed is proposed. And I think the scheme that is before us now, in our opinion, is way beyond what was required under the previous planning permission. That's really as much as we can say on it. I think that they can't really, for various operational reasons, provide additional significant tree planting than what they have done here. The limitations constrain that.
therefore, if I can follow up, I don't think it would be competent for us to ask for additional planting because there's no place to put it. Would that be correct? Unless they went and acquired another strip of land.
In effect, yes.
Do we have any further questions for officers? Councillor Wilson.
So just to follow on from that, so there was evergreen tree removal for operational reasons.
Not as part of the application to which we're discussing. So the proposal for the switch room, no.
Okay, so the trees weren't removed as part of the switch room scheme?
No.
But they were removed?
In advance of the overall upgrade of the wider facility.
Right. And what the contention is, I think this is where Councillor Anderson was coming from, that there's no longer the land. Is it the land issue or the ownership issue that prevents them from submitting? If the trees were removed as a result of development, yes or no?
I think my understanding is that the trees were removed in advance of development and no planning control was able to be exerted across that.
Okay, but the development was such, that part of the development, the overall scheme, right, is what you've referred to. When we gave consent for that overall scheme, did we not specify a landscaping plan to mitigate the effects of what is a not bonny exercise on the landscape?
No.
No. Why?
That was the decision that was taken. I mean, maybe, again, clarifying the situation.
Was the decision taken by this committee or was it another delegated powers exercise?
I don't have that information in front of me. I'd have to check back on the records in relation to that. But maybe what I could clarify, the trees that previously existed were within the area that's outlined in red, to my understanding.
I'm finding this, I'm sorry, Convener, this is a bit convoluted, but I'm finding it difficult. Maybe we could have an explanation in writing of the background to this issue, because I mean the case has been put forward by a deputation to say, can you do something about the overall landscaping? I think Mr. Smith's saying there are difficulties doing that because of land ownership, question mark, or technical reasons why you can't plant trees on top of cables or whatever else. Yeah? I think it would be useful for us to have a note in writing about that, because I'm not quite clear as to why, first of all, the trees were not encouraged to be replaced, right? You can put it that way. And secondly, what the detailed reasons are for our inability to do something about that aspect of it, rather than just the switch room. I think that's where Councillor Anderson was coming from.
Yeah, I think Mr. Fogg has thankfully and very kindly gone through the papers there, and the relevant application was before this committee, yes.
Okay. Right. We're all culpable then. But it would be useful to maybe just to have an explanatory note.
Your points are noted. Do you stick with the application in front of us? Do we have any further questions? No. Okay, thank you. Right. I'm going to move the paper. Again, I'm going to do the moving. I am a little bit of a stickler for doing things in a process. It's how I sleep at night. It's the application in front of us today is to enhance the landscaping. It isn't maybe as enhanced as much as the deputations would like it to be. But as a planning authority, asking SSE, or the applicant in this case, to put in planting in an area that they're not in control of, that they don't own, is not something we can ask them to do. This is an improvement on the previous already agreed planting. It's already agreed, it's already in place. And the reason I questioned whether Councillor Purvis had an answer to his question was because it would resort back to the previous planning agreement. If at any point they were not happy and wanted to just revert back, they could do so. And this is an improvement on that. So because of that, not because it is perfect, but because it is the best we can ask for, I am in agreement that we should move the paper as approved. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Convener. I will second that. I think it is perhaps disappointing, some of the decisions that have been taken previously at the committee, whether or not it would have been feasible to look at some more planting with a different arrangement of where the switch room and the substation are. But notwithstanding the fact that that point, there isn't really much else that we can do to try and improve the situation, and my concern would be that if we were to fuse this application or to do anything else, as you've already articulated, we might end up in a situation where the level of planting is worse than what's proposed. I think that I totally sympathise with the points that have been made by the local community, and perhaps there is further dialogue to be had with SSE, and perhaps the council or ward councillors can assist with that to see if there is something that can be done with the landowners and the area that's out with SSE's ownership, but to ensure that we don't have less planting than is proposed in this application, I'm happy to second your motion.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I have a question for the proposer of the motion. On the proposed condition 3 on page 83, would you be prepared to add the wording into that condition and maintain to the satisfaction of the planning authority?
Councillor Wilson, I am happy to add that.
Thank you. In that case, I will support.
Okay. Do we have an amendment? Committee, in that case, the application is approved. I understand that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but it isn't within our ability to ask somebody to do something on land they don't have and don't own. That's the way it is. So, thank you. Okay, that brings us on to the last couple of items of business. Okay. We have a PAN application for mixed-use development, Class 4 and Class 8 uses to include agricultural research, industrial engagement, skills development, training and education, associated business uses, formation of vehicle access, car parking, hard and soft landscaping, and associated infrastructure works at the James Hutton Institute in Errol Road in Invergowrie. Committee, do you have any comments that you would like to put forward to officers so that they can assess those comments at the same time as any future applications come forward? Councillor Anderson.
I think it's unfortunate, and I hope there's a lot of scrutiny on the fact that a lot of this, by description, the James Hutton Institute, they're working on prime agricultural land. And I would imagine a lot of this would be prime agricultural land taken out of production or use for finding alternatives, breeding of seed, etc. And it's a bit upsetting to see that being taken out and put into mixed development. But it may be that they're using brown site. I don't know if it's for fields or if it's actually brown site. We're getting some indication that it's not prime agriculture.
I think there is some information on that, and the majority of what is proposed is a reordering of their existing commercialised area.
Stackyards.
I would like to state on the record that there has been issues regarding Invergowrie and various concerns from the local community regarding traffic issues, rat runs and various other bits and pieces have been mentioned. I would like the planning authority to keep that in mind when the application comes forward to see if maybe that this either doesn't exacerbate or could hopefully enhance any issues that the local community may have. That might be something that would be important to take recognisance of.
Thanks, Convener. Just to follow on from that, I endorse your remarks in that regard. Having attended Invergowrie Secondary School, junior secondary school at one time, I know the site very well. I think the particular things I would want to highlight, I don't have anything to add to the list under 15, but the relationship with nearby land uses, including core paths, so the nearby land uses is Invergowrie Primary School, amongst others. There's also a church immediately adjacent. But the core paths issue is really important, because it's my understanding that there are some paths, whether they're all core paths or not, in the vicinity, in fact, transact the site, that are useful. And whilst you were right to raise the issue about traffic, I think that's important. Also, the impact of noise, both construction and operational. I don't know the details to Councillor Anderson's question, but there's quite a number of buildings already on site, and I think this proposal is to, as we've heard from Mr Smith, is an element of reconfiguration of that. That might impinge on land that is, inverted commas, prime agricultural land, but I think it also impinges substantially on what the built environment is already on the site. But I think the transport implications that you've highlighted are really important. There's not an easy solution to that, because you can't get, there's a railway on one side and there's the main road on the other, so I don't have any easy answers.
Any further comments? Councillor Illingworth?
Can I just quickly comment that Invergowrie may have changed since the 19th century, since you were at school there?
Thank you. I always appreciate these remarks. I feel a code of conduct as you coming on there. I'll accept it in the good nature in which it was given. Yeah.
Any further questions? Comments, sorry. No. Then in that case, it moves us on to the second plan in front of us, which is a mixed-use development comprising of residential, business, education and industrial use, hotel, community and health facilities, storage and distribution centres, charging and fueling station, formation of A9 junction, link road, active travel network, innovation highway and public roads improvements, vehicle depot and parking areas, heritage park, open spaces, landscaping and associated works at Perth West, which is MU70, Old Gallows Road in Perth. Are there any comments that officers can take away to assess when the application comes in? I'm surprised that nobody. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry. Yes, indeed. If my colleague on my right will allow me to speak again. First of all, again, the relationship with nearby land uses, including core paths, particularly important. There's a lot of rights away core paths in this particular bit that are extremely well used, and you mentioned Old Gallows Road. There's some evidence that that was the previous occupation of some of the medieval. I wasn't there, David, honestly. Fairly sure. But no, seriously, there's a lot of archaeological and history linked partly to do with the castle, but also to do with other sites within that. So I think these are, they're outlined here, but they really are pretty important things, an overall thing. The other issue, if you look on the last page, 107, and this is in relation to traffic and circulation. If you look very carefully, nearly all of this ground is towards the north or west of the bypass and or the A9, but some bits impinge on, I think that it's in Almond and Earn ward, I think.
It's all in Almond.
Not quite, Convener, I'll come to that in a moment. There's a chunk that transcends over the A9, but also, if you look carefully at where it says motel, at the Broxton roundabout, you'll see a wee bit of pink impinges on Perth South. And there is, I think, as part of the overall proposals, a suggestion, it's maybe more a proposal now, to have a link roadway that would go underneath the bypass, underneath the bypass, and link into Tweed Place, which would lead into link into Lamberkin Drive. That will be an issue that I would want particular care and attention taken to, because it will be an issue of some debate, controversy and consideration in the future.
Councillor Anderson?
We don't know for sure, but I think that that would be the reason for that pink bit there.
Yes, yes.
Is that not for an underpass? For, the hope that it would be an underpass to get access into underneath the A9 and into that. And yeah, I'm a wee bit puzzled about this bit that comes across the A9 and how that's going to be accessed. That's a bit on the A9 heading down to Glasgow. You see there's a bit comes across there.
I'm sure all will become clear. Right? If we could just have comments for officers to take note of, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the comment is, how's that access going to work for that?
They'll come through with various applications. I'm sure they'll look at access to do with that.
Yeah,
thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
The scheme has been presented to the Medfin and District Community Council, and I wasn't aware of a huge deal of sort of resistance to the scheme yet, but you know, time will tell.
Do we have any further comments on this for officers to take away? No? Well, in that case,